a jug or a cup of earthenware, their otherworldly interventions, the otherworldly intervention of servants and bearers, their thought of the outside, their disruption of closure, their suspension of pursuit is dismissed in common as already devalued commonness's underside, which is animated by that whose form it takes. Mere idle talk put together after the fashion of a lengthy poem. And that's a phrase, again, from the dialogue, right? Because it's when Plato wants to insult shit, certain kinds of discursive structures, when he wants to insult sophistry, when he wants to insult certain kinds of non or anti or what he might think of as pre-philosophical discursive events, he calls it poetry. Right? And this relation between poetry and mere idle talk is something that keeps getting played out constantly, I think, through the history of philosophy, in ways that, well, we can, well, I'll continue. Phenomenology's variously public and private debts to the transcendental subject and to transcendental intersubjectivity are often manifest as impatience with idle talk, idle chatter, even when such chatter is understood to be the subhuman insignificance of those who are relegated to the fullest possible employment, which evokes not only the wordlessness of the work song, but also the expropriated linguistic underlabor, expropriated within the general project of exclusionary self-possessive subjectivation that is given in the form of an implied response to the bad faith speech of anti-blackness. This is to say, and I think this is what Fanon is most pissed off about, and righteously so, is that the doctor's impertinent questions to his black patients already imply an answer that would be given in the gestures that accompany mute, impossible positionality. And so Fanon performs in thought such questioning's appositional unasking. This is the character of his complete Lysis. Sorry, I wrote I wrote some of this morning, so I'm kind of messing up. I didn't correct my typos. Okay, but this is the character of his complete Lysis. It is complete, but as Wallace Stevens would say, in an unexplained completion. This is the interminable as opposed to the last analysis, the interminable analysis of the last, the eschatological sounding of the alternative, de profundis, out of the depths, out from the outside. It's kind of following up on the question that okay. We still have to discover, we have to keep discovering what that sounding sounds like in the ongoing refusal of a standpoint, of a jurisdiction for such hearing, in the ongoing critique of a certain notion of judgment. The absence and refusal of the standpoint is given in the sound of that sounding, which Fanon leads us to, but to which he didn't always listen. Here's where the problematic of lyris, okay, disturbs and augments Lysis. Here's where whatever it is that the pathologist means to examine in its own degenerative and regenerative differentiation moves in disruption of the pathologist's standpoint, which is to say that the tools and protocols and methods of the pathologist, however much they have made possible an approach, cannot, shall we say, manage entrance into the zone of non-being. From outside of that zone, from the ruins of a standpoint, from one of the numberless husks of an inhabitable possibility, Lysis morphs into autopsy so that non-being's generativity, as it is manifest in noises, in chatters, in gobbledygooks, in pigeons' social refusal of imposed and impossible intersubjectivity, is taken for sterility, its flow taken for aridity. But we will note the beauty and insistence of Fanon's animating claim, his animated clameur. And this is another quote. And I'll repeat, because I've already mentioned this once. There is a zone of non-being, an extraordinarily sterile and arid region, an incline stripped bare of every essential form from which a new genuine, of every essential from which a genuine new departure can emerge, In most cases, the black man cannot take advantage of this descent into a veritable hell. There is a zone of non-being, I'm repeating now the other translation, an extraordinarily sterile and arid region, an utterly naked declivity where an authentic upheaval can be born. This is Markman, and the one that's sort of more familiar, just because I think authentic upheaval kind of just sounds better than genuine new departure to my ear. Right? Okay. An utterly naked declivity where an authentic upheaval can be born. In most cases, the black man lacks the advantage of being able to accomplish this descent into a real hell. And those two translations are like, they're both kind of annoying and maddening in a way, right? And I guess I should try it. I'm not even, well, try to read the French, but what Philcox says, in most cases, the black man cannot take advantage of this descent into a veritable hell. Markman messes that up. Philcox is more accurate there, and rightly, and I think it's important to note it. Markman says, in most cases, the black man lacks the advantage of being able to accomplish this descent into a real hell. See the difference, right? Between taking advantage, right, of the descent, that it is implied that the black man has already undergone, okay, and the inability to accomplish the descent. But even in the mistranslation, it's in the tension between the two that something cool happens, because first of all, this descent into hell that Fanon talks about, he talks about by way, again, of the language of biochemical experimentation. Because declivity is literally, he's talking about the way that you would take a test tube and put it at an incline precisely in order to help to foster, right, the activity of lysis as a biochemist in order to reproduce the conditions of the illness, right? So it's really a technical term within the context of biochemical experimentation, that you literally put the test tube at an angle in order to make possible this experimental sort of maneuver that you're trying to construct, right? So what's beautiful and amazing, right, in this confluence of this sort of link of these two kinds of biochemistry, the language of biochemistry and the language of poetics, literally the language of that goes all the way back to Homer, right? The language literally of the descent into hell, right? That epic poetic language. This is what Fanon is sort of producing, is a confluence between these two things, right? The descent into hell is part of the experiment, right? We live in the damn experiment, right? We live in the hell that is constructed as an experimental field, right? That produces black life as pathology, okay? It's like this, it's okay. So this is what, but at the same, so he actually brings to the table, it's like that thing when you kind of realize that in fact, well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad understood this, right? That black life in the New World was essentially an evil experiment, right? I mean, well, anyway, he understood a lot of stuff, actually. Problematic though his understanding might have been. But at any rate, okay. Naked declivity, gradient centrifugation, as Mackey would have it. The zone of non-being is experimental, is a kind of experiment. This double edge of the experiment, this theater of like and unlike, in which friendships, sociality overflows its political regulation. Destination down and out, whence springs the difference that earthly beauty brings. Lysis, Lys, Lycée, Socrates and Lysis, Césaire and Fanon, somewhere between the Lyceum and the Academy, a recitation of unrequited love. Two more quotes from Fanon. Society, unlike